Good morning.
Realize I'm on audio or on mute. Um, so does that mean we owe them payroll tax? Correct?
That means we won't get all of it back. So that's why I had to ask her which employees it was so that I can book that to the right departments.
So have they been taking the tax from us? Because it
Not
sounded
for
like
the
you said they weren't set up yet.
Not for the new employees, because Stephanie, there would have been a pop-up that said, do you want to set up the credit? And she must have said no.
And so, we need to pay them then. So we have not been paying enough payroll tax. Well, now we have, because they've taken
Now
our
we have.
revenue.
Yes. Yes. So I'm just gonna have to book that expense.
Okay,
That's why I asked, because Bella said, well, I'm gonna make it so it auto-populates, so it's not an option, it just populates. So that's why I just emailed Allison to confirm that that's been done, because I can't see where to see that in the system. Because the employees don't pay it, so I can't see where that is.
yeah. Okay, well, at least we got it figured out.
Yep. And the other thing makes sense as far as the third party.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know what that was for. It's just, we had a credit, if you look at December's expenses for the month, we actually had a credit balance.
Right. Because that's for it's for prior years, basically, like that DeVivo refund was for things that we bought in
Or
prior
actually,
years.
I think it was in November. November, we had a credit balance, I think it was.
Right.
But it helped push, like, that was a reason we're also showing, our expenses went down quite a bit on the rural side because of that. So that's another reason we were pushed into Connor comes to finance committee. Interesting. I didn't notice. Good. He's here before the board members.
So yeah, that credit is still on the rural side. I just moved it between Berlin and FGI.
I'm getting a little worried. It's 8 o'clock right now and Paul is not here, so that scares me. Got no call. I should check my voicemail. Got an email. I wonder if he forgot. Paul. It's his phone number. Susan. No, I have Paul's number around here somewhere. Ethan. No, for a fact I have his phone. Morning, everyone. Paul is not here yet, and I am searching for his phone number. But would someone else like to start the meeting and run the meeting from here? I'm happy to do that if no one else wants to.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that if I can fill in for Paul until he's here.
Sounds good.
Well, as the acting chair of this committee, then I'll call the meeting to order at 8:02 PM. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Staff.
What's that?
I said none from staff.
Okay, great. Well, then I will assume then by consensus, we've got an approved agenda, and I'll turn it over to you, Nick. Let's see, minutes, I don't have the agenda right here.
Yeah, minutes from January, Chapin.
Yeah.
Need to be approved.
Great. Do I have a motion to approve those?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second the motion.
Great. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes are approved.
I just want to double check. Do we have a quorum right now? Three is enough?
I believe so.
Okay.
Is it 5 or 6 on this committee?
I thought that it was 5, because isn't it Will and Paul are the 2 that aren't here?
No, Will, Paul, and Austin are not here.
Oh, yeah.
So we can move forward, we just can't approve stuff, if that's all right with folks.
We will revisit the minutes approval then when we get a quorum here.
Okay,
So we can proceed with the information items that you've got on the agenda.
sounds good, okay. So I got back to providing a written report. I am going to try my best to provide that every month going forward. It won't be as extensive as, you know, the previous ones that I did. I think, you know, we'll cover the items that I've left out, like when we do our quarterly in-depth presentations. Here comes Will. So, Chapin, do you want to jump back to dealing with those items, or do you want me to continue?
Why don't we jump back?
Okay.
Will, good morning. Hello, Will.
Hello,
Are
good
you
morning.
able to hear us?
Yes,
You
can.
are our quorum, so we are gonna jump back. Are there any concerns or updates to the agenda, Will?
No, I reviewed it and looks good to go. So
Great,
please, let's proceed.
okay, great. And then to minutes, now that we have a quorum, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the January minutes.
Your consistent, Susan.
Second.
Second, if necessary. Okay.
Good.
All right, I'll take Michael, who was the second or last time. Any discussion? All those in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, now we have officially approved the minutes, and now we can move over. Let's see, we didn't check for public comment last time, Nick. Can I just check in quickly? Is there
Yeah,
any
there's-
member?
There's no one in the boardroom.
Okay. Is there any member online, member of the public? All right, not seeing any or hearing any, please proceed, Nick.
Okay, so like I said, I provided a written report. I'm gonna quickly go through this. I'm not gonna touch every item, but we have had some staffing changes in the finance department. We unfortunately lost Kim Smith, who's our staff accountant. Very happy for her. She moved on to CCRPC, so we will still be seeing her every once in a while. But we are down a person now, which is why Tim isn't at the meeting today. He's catching up on some grant related items. The only other items that I really have is the 5307 apportionment. We did get our partial year apportionment. The good news is we kept 4 stick factors, so that's great. I had a lot of concern about that, a little bit of heartburn. So the other good news is it looks like that apportionment figure is a little bit higher than what I had initially budgeted for FY 26. So that'll be helpful, although we still have quite, you know, a hill to climb there. But I'm happy to report that. The 24 audit is currently in progress. I'm sorry, it's taking longer than I would like. You you know, I think we should have it for you folks in March. I have been in contact with V-Trans in case it does go past that, because our state grant agreement does say we need to have, you know, an approved audit in March. So if we don't have that, that's okay, Dan said, but you know, we're gonna shoot or aim to have that done in March if we can. We'll be talking about the assessment review today. Clayton presented that to the governance committee. It was attached to the finance committee materials. So I won't go into too much of that because we'll be jumping to that next. We are discussing what we're going to be doing for the upcoming paratransit contract. That's one of our largest contracts here at GMT. Just some background, SSTA provides ADA and other paratransit services. We typically do an RFP. We are discussing a one-year extension to that, possibly. So more to come on that in the future. There's a little bit of apprehension to do an RFP right now because we are possibly doing a micro transit study for Chittenden County, which could affect, you know, the scope of that RFP. But we'll have more information on that and over the next couple months. The rural transit rate, we are having some difficulties with. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The transit rate is very, very important on both sides, especially on the rural side, because it helps kind of drive our grant billing processes. Unfortunately, we found that there was some misunderstanding up in the St. Albans area on some of the data, how to collect that data, which essentially pushed the rate up higher than it should have been. So we are hoping to have that corrected over the next couple months and do an adjustment. So the good news is that the rate is actually likely quite a bit lower than what we've been providing. I don't want you to worry in terms of the financials. It doesn't impact the bottom line. What it does impact is really kind of how the expenses are broken out by program. And so we are going to true that up once we get updated data for January. So more on that in the coming months as well. But we're happy we found it. And it does mean that hopefully, you know, GMT is likely quite a bit cheaper in terms of its operating costs on a per unit basis. The only other item I have, I just want to bring to the committee's attention, we are having some, or we're having some tax issues. As many of you might know, there was a child care tax credit that was passed here in Vermont. The company very graciously agreed to pick up the full cost of that. So by law, we could have allocated a portion of it to employees, but we chose not to. And we found that on some recent new hires, those taxes were actually not being paid through the software. What ended up happening is when V-Trans went to pay us, the tax department said, you need to pay us first, and they took their share multiple times. And so the good news is we're gonna, you know, work all this out. But I did want to bring to your attention that we did have some funds intercepted recently. So I will be back reporting on that in the coming months and letting you know if there's any other issues, but we believe we found the problem and it should be an easy fix. Moving on to the financials, we had a lot of improvement. So again, in your packet, you'll see complete November financials and then December expenses. I believe December actually has capital, the capital section actually has depreciation and all those items as well. So it's complete in that month. November, we were still not able to close out our fixed asset module. So things like depreciation and those types of items were not included. But at least in the operating statement, November is fully complete. And did show quite a large improvement. So last month, when I reported the figures, we were showing roughly $154,000 deficit across both urban and rural. As you might remember, most of that, about $110,000, was on the rural side. now, if you look at November, that's actually swung from $154,000 deficit to a roughly $53,000 surplus. Again, as I mentioned last month, the urban deficit was really a deficit made of my own making. I was waiting to see if we were going to be able to recognize more local funds to be able to leverage more federal funds. We were able to do that in November, so that erased that entire deficit, which was good. That was really the thanks of the legislative funds that came through. So you might remember about $635,000, or exactly that, is what the legislature gave to us, and we were able to start recognizing some of that revenue now that Clayton delivered his final report to the legislature. So we were happy to be able to recognize that revenue because obviously it was local money. And then on the rural side, the major change there was seasonal service. Brings many good things beyond happy skiers. It also brings additional revenue that we can recognize because Stowe Mountain Resort and Sugar Bush actually represent quite a large chunk of all the local funds that we collect on the rural side. And so in those winter months, we go from recognizing, about $14,000 of revenue each month in terms of local dollars to recognizing about like $70,000. And so those additional revenues were being recognized starting in November. Obviously, those were increased revenues, which helped the bottom line. The other thing is that Medicaid, also, we finished paying back our losses from not our losses, but our gains from last fiscal year. So Medicaid upped our PMPW back up to regular amounts, and also November had 5 weeks in it, so we got 5 payments. So a lot of things on the expense side. We did have a large credit that came back in the maintenance department, so we actually had like a credit balance for the month in our parts expense line, so that was helpful as well. But yeah, November, a lot of good things that helped us move back where I'd like to see us, which, obviously is we don't want to show too much of a gain, but we don't want to show a loss either. So we want to be in that sweet spot, of not showing a loss, but obviously, we're not a for-profit corporation either. So, but happy to answer any questions. Remember next month we'll be hitting Q2. Here comes Paul. We'll be hitting Q2, so I'll be doing a much more in-depth presentation, but I'm happy to, answer any questions about the financials right now. I honestly think we're in really good shape. There's a couple items that I would like to see, closer to where I'd like us to be at this point, but the bottom line is in a good place, especially on the rural side. On the urban side, our 5307 spending is actually in much better shape than I expected it to be. So, we've spent about 38% of our budgeted 5307 funds this fiscal year of what I planned on. And so I'd expect us to be about 42% at this point. And so we're, about 400 basis points of an improvement there. Now, obviously, I can't see the future, and so things, can change, but our expenses on the urban side don't tend to be super volatile like they can be on the rural side because of service coming in and out at certain periods of time. So I think there is a chance that we end the year better than where we expected to be. That could help FY26. And so that's what I'm hoping for right now. But yeah, no warning red signs at this point. And hopefully December and January we'll continue down that path as well. That's all I have, Chapin.
Thank you. And that's really helpful. And I think that there's the important context here is that while we're doing better than budget, potentially, still the budget is a very challenging situation. And I think it's just important for this recorded meeting for people not to have too rosy of a picture. Before I get to you, Susan, Paul, I've been chairing the meeting in your absence. Do you want to take over now or not? What's your pleasure?
My apologies for being late. If you want to continue, Chapin, go right ahead.
Okay, Susan, you're up.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nick. It is hard to balance sort of the positive, emotions, feelings that you've conveyed there with kind of the big picture of where we still are as a transit agency. I was wondering if you could just back up for a minute. I don't know if you've had these conversations elsewhere, but could you talk a little bit about how the Trump policies are or might be affecting our budget situation, and if we need to do any planning around sort of what if scenarios?
Yeah, I would say immediately it hasn't affected our budget at all because, we haven't changed any of our numbers because of, his new administration. I think we're still moving forward with assuming we're still gonna get, our regular 5307 apportionment and whatnot. What it has done is added a lot of uncertainty, so we were supposed to send a purchase order for 5 electric buses last week. We held back on that because we don't want to order buses and then have that money be clawed back and then be stuck on the tab owing $5 million. So it has especially slowed us down on the capital side. It's also added some uncertainty with things we might be hearing from VTrans where we know Ross has some plans to use carbon reduction funds to close some of our budget gap in FY26. And so, we don't know enough about those funds, but, are those going to get clawed back too? I think it's just added a lot of uncertainty. It hasn't changed our budget projections per se, but it has, there's especially that possible federal grant pause was very concerning. And I will be bringing, I'm hoping next month, a line of credit proposal to the finance committee. We've been talking to our local banker. And so we'd like to get that established because, if things like that happen, we need to be able to make payroll, things of that nature. So we'll want to do some planning on that.
And if I'll expand a little bit on that, Nick, and so certainly the thing that concerns me in the most immediate future is those bus purchases. And, we had a call with FTA where they couldn't guarantee that if we ordered these buses that we'd get funds for them, eventually. And so then, of course, who would be on the hook for $8 million worth of electric buses? We would be. And so we may be having to come to the board in March with a very difficult decision there. I will say that when the initial executive order came out about freezing, grant funding, there was a lot of confusion. Some sources said that it applied to 5307 and 5311. Some sources said it didn't. We had to go through this, do we need to stop our service right now, discussion, and how long can we pay for service without federal funds? So it certainly has been disruptive to us, which, was probably the intent.
Well, I know that, if I'm understanding things correctly, we've been feeling like we need to kind of shift away as much as possible from being too reliant on federal funding and just looking at the nature of new leadership in the Department of Transportation, which doesn't seem to be especially transit friendly. I just wonder if there's a need for us to be thinking about potential scenarios where there is significant cuts to federal funding to transit.
Yep. And I think that, one of the things that you'll be happy to hear, Susan, is that that the leadership committee is started working on our strategic plan again, because, as you've been saying all along, it's hard to go through these decisions when, we have a somewhat dated strategic plan. And I think that one of the things that our strategic plan is going to have to incorporate is some, emergency scenarios. What do we do if federal funds, dry up?
Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. Michael?
Yes, along the same line, Nick, to what Chapin said earlier, and Susan referenced, could you give me a one or two liner in a sort of a technical way to to explain what Chapin said is, even though someone were to jump on and listen to this story or see these data sheets and say, wow, why are you guys having a crisis? Is it over? I mean, like someone from the city or someone from my city council, what would I say? What is the technical correct answer instead of just saying, no, it still exists?
Well, remember, most of that gain, you know, the 50,000, 30 of it, I think, as if I'm looking at this correctly, is on the rural side. So, you know, the rural side isn't having a financial crisis, it's the urban side. And honestly, the urban division is showing a $23,000 surplus out of a very, very large budget. I mean, that's within the margin of error, you know, I think. So yes, I guess my remarks were more for the rural side, because that's where we were showing a 6-figure deficit last month. You know, the urban side has improved because we got more local money, and so we were able to draw down more federal funds, but this doesn't change our future trajectory of FY26, which, you know, we just have a major shortfall. We have a lot of one-time funds that are rolling off, and so it's, you know, I think I didn't mean to overstate, you know, I don't want to make it sound like our problems are erased by November's results. That's not what I meant at all. I just meant in terms of specifically on the rural side, the budget improved, which again has no relation to the issues that we're having on the urban side. So I'm sorry that was much more than 1 or 2 liners, but I would just say if someone was watching this, my remarks were more catered to the rural side, which again is a total separate and really distinct division from the urban side. You know, funds cannot be commingled, and it's a whole different funding source funded by different folks. So
Great. Michael, any additional questions? Paul, Will?
I'm all set, thanks.
Yeah, Clayton.
Nick, one of the things that we're going to need to address when I go to the State House next week is the route performance report. And the Sugar Bush route is one of the underperforming routes that we've already heard from Ross that he has an interest in us, you know, potentially canceling because it's underperforming. But can you tell me what the impact would be for our local match if we got rid of Sugar Bush? I have a feeling that this is advice that if we follow will actually be financially harmful to us.
yeah, I mean, I think Sugar Bush gives us about 114,000. It's a little over 100,000, I think, is what they provide to us in local match. So likely the direct cost of adding that, of taking away that service might not save us as much as we think, and it also would push our transit rate higher because suddenly all this overhead is now being spread over less units of service. So I can work up a direct calculation of that. I would just need to know the amount of service hours that Sugar Bush represents. But my guess is we were possibly better off running that, or V-Trans won't see the savings that they might think they would save by getting rid of that service when you net out the loss of local funds.
Right. And then I guess
So
that
sorry.
begs the question of, are there strategies to try to turn that around in ways that, you know, if it's a relatively break-even proposition for us from a transit rate and a local match rate, how do we pull the alarm bells with our partners in the Mad River and try to, you know, turn the service around?
Higher local match percentages is always something V-Trans likes to see. However, I think they said they wanted 100% of it covered or something like that. Clayton, I think, is what they might have asked for, and you know, that might not be doable. But just to correct myself, they give us roughly a little over $126,000 is what Sugar Bush provides. Yeah, I mean, I think this might be just a good time to be able to get Sugar Bush's level of contribution up higher if they really want to keep the service. it's still gonna be a lot cheaper than if they went to provide it themselves. The capital investment they would need would be much higher. They'd have to pay 100% of the cost. So I think, you know, this might be a good opportunity to get a higher level investment towards the service out there.
Because that's already like about 20% of the rural local match, right?
Yeah.
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 So again, it's a real short-sighted recommendation from our funding partner.
Well, I think to the extent that, right, we can do some strategic work on the backside to try to help our partners, help the region kind of embrace the service, and maybe we need to do some service adjustments to meet that need. I would love to find ways to be moving ahead in a different direction than lopping off services. You say Clayton pays for a large chunk of our local match on the rural side. Susan.
So I'm sorry, and can you help me understand? So what would the process be if we were to ask them to increase the local match? What does that process look like?
Essentially, we would negotiate with them this summer that if they want us to continue to do the service, that we would need a higher, you know, contribution from them.
And is the decision to move forward with that idea, is that made at the board level?
That's a good question. I don't think it's the type of thing that we haven't had this during my 2 years, something similar to this. And so I don't know if Nick or Paul or Chapin have the experience to weigh in.
Well, in my opinion, V-Trans has the ultimate decision because they determine how much money, you know, is provided on the rural side. So, you know, the board might not be in favor of it, but if the funds are not allocated, you know, essentially the service has to go away because there's no financial support for it. I suppose we could make a decision to, you know, somehow support it with all of our local funds, but obviously that wouldn't be a direction I would recommend. But yeah, it seems more of a, now the board can advocate, but it seems more of a decision Ross can make just through his allocation of funds.
Yes, Paul.
Yeah, just thinking that the Mad River Association, I think that's the name of the organization. They usually are part of the conversation, so I don't know whether they would see the value in that service as much as the mountain does, and whether the members would think of ways of increasing revenues from that.
Yeah.
Paul,
Appreciate that, Paul. You know, it's clearly been a strong snow year to the extent that we can be working with our partners in the Mad River and trying to turn around the end of the season. That's certainly the best case scenario to have a more virtuous cycle instead of a negative feedback cycle here. Michael.
And I just stands to reason that, you know, as I think you said before and Susan said, we have to turn over every stone. And if we're going to say there's equity, there's also equity in making sure that everyone carries, you know, their fair share to try to make this a sustainable system.
Getting to Susan's question though, is this something that, you know, I negotiate between V-Trans and Sugarbush? Does the board get involved with a decision making like this? I could, what I think probably would make sense would be having Christian, the Washington County rep, you know, participate and provide the board perspective.
My perspective, anything, you know, I'm sorry to jump in, but if, you know, you're responsible for making a solvent operationally effective, you know, that's what I would see within your charter. As you said, it affects one particular board or one particular member of the board in particular, and he would be basically the eyes and ears for the board because the implications are for him. But I think, you know, the idea of being flexible and jumping on opportunities when they arrive should be within your bailiwick.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, you know, you and our rep from that area are going to bring together an FY26 proposal, and we're going to see what V-Trans's take of that proposal is. And to the extent there's a greater match contribution or a reimagined service, my sense is our funding partner would be more interested if we have a solution to increase the ridership and improve the performance of the route.
Yep.
And if,
Just want to add to
Yeah.
that. I think, Chapin, your point is really good about what are the opportunities to increase service now. So that would mean starting those conversations immediately and looking for those opportunities. So whatever other partners should be brought into that conversation, I myself would encourage that step to be taken as soon as you have the bandwidth for that.
Yeah, helpful. We are almost at time to move to the next item. Are there any final thoughts on this one? Okay, hearing none. This next item is also very impactful. The proposed rule on urban assessments. And so I'm sure staff will want to lay out the policy that's in the packet. It's a draft policy, and why don't you run us through it?
And so I think that our discussion may be shorter than expected because, as usual, Chapin, you are very convincing. And so earlier this week, there was some back and forth between Chapin and I on the necessity for making this rule change, and I've sort of become swayed to the belief that that it may not be necessary. But after that introduction, let me sort of paint the picture of what we're trying to do, and then you all can decide whether we need to move forward. So as I've been going to the municipalities, one of the things that has been sort of a common refrain since I've gotten here is, worry, especially from the smaller municipalities, that GMT has a practice of changing service levels without changing assessment levels, and that gives agita to especially the smaller members. The when we were looking at our initial cut list for how we could balance our budget by reducing service, there were some of our smaller members that specifically the town of Essex that potentially could have all of their service cut, and those communities were very vocal about the concern of getting an assessment from GMT, then having service levels changed after the assessment is issued, and then having to pay based on the previous service levels. So our solution for that was going to be to have a true up exercise. And this is a true up exercises are something that we normally do on every few years, so that when there becomes a disconnect between the level of service that we're providing to communities and what we're billing gets married back up again. And so the thought was that we would do a true up exercise this June based on whatever service reductions come out in the coming weeks and months here. When we talked about this with the folks in governance, we thought this may be an opportunity to put our urban assessment policy into the new rule format, and then to add a true up to that policy. I think that in talking with Chapin, since we already have plans to coordinate with CCRPC on a new assessment methodology, the thinking was that instead of amending our rural policy here, our rule on assessments, as I'm getting tripped over my own tongue, that this really is probably only going to be applicable for 1 year. And so if the board decides to do a true up exercise, the board can just tell us to do a true up exercise. We don't need to amend the rule. And so I'm thinking that probably makes sense, and that we don't need to spend the board time or the staff time amending a rule that's just going to be going away probably in 6 months anyway. And it also gives the board the flexibility to decide whether or not it wants to do a true up. One of the things that we are looking at is that because of the governor's budget means that we only need to do another 500,000 worth of reductions and not 1.2 million worth of reductions. We're not going to be recommending the number 10 be eliminated. And so that means that the community with the biggest concern, suddenly isn't really going to have that as a factor, because it looks like they'll end up getting approximately the same hours of service as before. And so as is many times when we're working in a fluid situation, what seemed like an important need 45 days ago suddenly doesn't seem that important right now. And so I think that I would suggest that that we take no action on the rule. We wait to see how things sugar out with the remaining service reductions. And if we see that there is a community that's more larger impacted than others, then we can address that later.
I'll raise my hand. Sorry.
Yeah, well, go for it.
You alluded to 6 months there, Clayton, but
Mhm.
just for my own not being aware of this, can you briefly summarize the process and timeline for when we're going to get the CCRPC new assessment plan? And is there any sign of what that will look like, how different it will be?
And so the assessment plan will probably be starting to work in March. This is really where the bottlenecks of our limited staff capacity are causing problems, because just as we want to get out to to Sugar Bush to solve that problem, we also have this that we have to do, and so it really is a matter of triage and figuring out which are the most important items. And so in talking with CCRPC, though, they would like to get started with this in March. One of the things that we're looking at is really, starting off with a somewhat blank slate, where we talk with town managers and city managers about, what are the things that they would, want to see, what's important to them, so that we sort of build the system with their input, knowing that 3/4 of them are going to have to approve the new methodology in order for it to, to take effect. And so, so our plan is not to sort of draft an assessment and then give it to them and get their input. It's to really, start with their input. And so that'll start happening in March.
Will, anything else? Okay, Paul.
Yes, 2 points. One is that even though there's $500,000 in the governor's budget, it's only February. And so what that would look like come May is a real good question. And so I wouldn't necessarily count on that 500. Maybe it'll be a 0, maybe it'll be some other number. That's one. And the other, I guess it's a question, what's the impetus for looking at our assessment formula? Where'd that begin?
Well, I can tell you it's beginning with me, because one of the things I have a constant frustration with is this battle that we have with our members about them wanting things and us having no methodology to get payment from it. And so, and where we see that a lot is things like amenities. All right, somebody wants a new amenity in their district. GMT is going to absorb those costs. It doesn't affect the assessment at all. We have the ongoing operational of having to send people out to do the snow removal. And so that means that our standard answer to our municipalities for just about everything they want is no. And what I want to be able to do is say, hey, here is an assessment methodology that includes things like, hey, you want a new stop? You want us to maintain it? Here's the cost. And so that they can then start, choosing. I think that this current assessment system was built to provide budget predictability, which is a wonderful goal. But it is a goal that has then hamstrung our ability to actually work with our members on what they want. And so I think that I don't see us having a pathway forward where we can have, positive, cordial relationships with our municipalities during struggling budgetary times, unless we can provide them with certainty. Because when I talk to municipalities and they show me the assessment letter, it doesn't tell them how that money is spent. They don't know how the money is spent, and and so I think that, if they don't understand how their money is being used, then they're resistant to giving it to us.
Anything else, Paul?
No, I think we'll let it go with that.
Okay, Michael.
Thank you. This is, I think, an important discussion. Just to maybe share from a city council perspective, constantly revisiting this issue is not a helpful. The sense of nickel and diming and changing is something that sort of gets frustrating. City council's menus agendas are very busy, and you want to address the issue once and then move on. So I would say that until we have we have this new assessment, better to just wait till then to apply it. Also, because the new assessment formula would come after we know how all our own municipalities have done with the budget. It'll be after March, town day, and we'll also know the school budgets, because ultimately our taxpayers are the same, whether it's school budget or civic budget. So I would say that strategically and just politically savvy, come one time, and one time with a sense of predictability. And I fully agree. I know from my colleagues on the council, what Clayton was just speaking to is some sense of partnership that allows some flexibility and fine tuning. Is what I think municipalities are looking for. It's partnership, and if we choose to invest in X, Y, or Z, we'll have a partner that we can work with. So, for all those reasons, I think wait till we get the new methodology and try to have a comprehensive approach that allows greater flexibility in partnerships.
Thanks, Michael. Susan.
Yeah, I just want to say that I support the perspective that Clayton and Mike are sharing. I agree that even in Shelburne, they're also trying to kind of rethink some things, and it's confusing for them to figure out, whether something is worth it, because it's not really clear how the process works when you want to change something. So I agree with, let's just hold off and get the assessment model done and then implement it. So I'm hoping that'll be done. CCRPC tends to take just a year to do their work. So hopefully something in the late fall, we'll see some results. I also want to just share with you that from the perspective of the walk bike groups that I work with in Chittenden County, we talked a lot about walkability and bikeability, but there's also a strong interest amongst those folks about transit and real support for transit. And what I hear in those communities is a desire for internal shuttles, having something, little loops within their community where transit can be a really important solution to local concerns. So I've heard it in Winooski, I've heard it in Shelburne, I've heard it in Williston, I've heard it in South Burlington. Well, I know South Burlington, one of their important grounding philosophies is really thinking about investments in their transportation system that serve the residents of South Burlington. So I just want to put that out there. That would be the kind of change in service that it would be really interesting and helpful for local municipalities to know. What would it cost if we were to ask GMT to help us mount a little mini shuttle within our community? So,
and I think that what's going to make this complicated is that we're probably going to need to figure out, okay, here's the baseline of service, and this is how we will distribute our limited federal funds, across the membership. But if a community wants more than that, that this is, the challenge then is if they draw down more federal funds, even if they're providing that 20% local match, that impacts the other, the other communities. And so to me, one of the biggest challenges is setting, here's the baseline. And then for really transit forward municipalities that want more service, then we're going to have to figure out how that additional service can be added with a cost distribution that doesn't then impact others. We do know that this will be complicated because very few of our routes stay entirely within one district or within one membership. So using the South Burlington example, South Burlington may say, hey, we want the 11 to be every 15 minutes, and Burlington will say, no, we want it to be every 30, and we're not willing to pay for that. And then we're going to have to figure out, how to navigate that. But I think that, Paul may be suspicious with this because he, knows how difficult this will be to get everybody to agree on this. And I think that one of the things that will be a challenge is that if you actually pay for the service you're receiving, it's not going to be as predictable. And so we may be solving some problems by creating new ones, but hopefully we can avoid that.
Isn't anything else? You good? All right, Nick.
I just want to point out the other complicating factor is, especially if we're going to look at, how much what federal funds are we distributing by members? The fixed route is not the only place that uses federal funds, right? Remember, we only fund 55% of the ADA program with local dollars. So, roughly 45%. Of the cost of that program is federal funds as well. So we really almost have to look at both of those assessments, which have different methodologies to determine, who's receiving what out of that limited pot of federal dollars. Just want to point that out.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing in this conversation, at least from several members here, is that a sense to let it ride for a bit. To use an expression that we've talked about on this urban assessment issue, allow the CCRPC study to get underway. Appreciate Susan's comment of trying to get it concluded in time for FY27, such that we can pull that into the regular budget process and hit the local select boards once instead of multiple times. Do I have that correct?
Sounds good, Chapin.
Okay, in staff, does that direction work for you? I think the one area that, Paul laid out is that if the state funding changes dramatically and it puts us in a situation where one member community is going to be impacted more than expected, then we could look at a one-time true up as you discussed, Clayton. And I'm open to that, but I think as you laid out now, Clayton, that there's a path to kind of keep business as usual for this next fiscal year, with the understanding we come back in 27 with a new policy. Okay, great. Well, with that, moving back to the agenda, we have other business. Any other items the committee members want to bring? All right, hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Michael's moved. Second from Will. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? We stand adjourned at 8:51. And thanks, Paul, for giving me the opportunity to chair today's meeting.
Sorry to miss out on doing the work, but thank you for stepping in. Appreciate it.
Well, we covered good ground today. Thanks everybody for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.